Thanksgiving has always been sacred in my family. A time when we all came together, no matter what had happened throughout the year. Whether we were speaking or not. Whether we were holding grudges or pretending everything was fine. We showed up. The smell of roasted turkey, sweet potatoes, my homemade apple pie. Those were the constants. Laughter over mismatched chairs. Kids running through the halls with jelly on their faces. Cousins arguing over board games in the living room. A chaotic kind of harmony that made the house feel full, alive. That year was no different. At least on the surface. My daughter had flown in the night before, along with her husband and their little girl, my 6-year-old granddaughter, Ava. My only grandchild. My light. I remember watching her as she twirled around the dining room in her sparkly dress, humming along to a song no one else could hear. She always hummed when she was nervous. I didn't realize it then. I was seated at the head of the table, carving the turkey like I always did, laughing too hard at jokes that weren't that funny, sipping my wine just to keep my hands busy. But then something happened. Something small. Quiet. Easy to miss. Ava walked over to me and grabbed my arm. Not in a playful way. Not in a clumsy, excited kid way. But carefully. Deliberately. She looked up at me with eyes far too serious for her age. And she whispered, "Grandma, you have to go. Right now." At first I laughed. I thought she was being silly. Maybe she wanted me to come play a game or sneak her another slice of pie. I leaned in and whispered back, "What's going on, baby?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the little sequined purse she carried everywhere. Pulled out her phone. "Just watch this," she said, holding it up with both hands, like it was fragile. I took the phone confused. I pressed play. And within seconds, everything changed. My hands went cold. My body stiffened. My heart slowed. My eyes never left the screen. I couldn't look away. I couldn't speak. Because on that little phone, in that crowded room, with laughter echoing around me and candles flickering on the table, I saw the truth. And it shattered everything I thought I knew. Everything. They say some betrayals come in the form of a slap. This one came with a whisper. And I wish I could tell you that was the worst part. But it wasn't. I used to believe that family was the one thing in life you could never truly lose. People come and go. Jobs change. Health fades. But family? That's supposed to be your anchor. That belief stayed with me for most of my life. Especially after my husband passed away. He was my compass. 43 years of marriage. Steady, quiet love. A man who wasn't perfect but who never made me doubt that I was safe with him. When he died, the world got a little louder and a lot lonelier. But I still had my daughter and her little girl. My daughter Claire is complicated. As a child she was bright. Sharp as a tack. Always 2 steps ahead of her classmates. Always the one organizing the others on the playground like a little CEO. But somewhere along the way, the warmth started to leave her. She became more polished. More careful with her words. Still loving, but distant, like someone always watching the clock, measuring their time. And when she married David, that distance only grew. David was never cruel. In fact, he was always courteous. Well-dressed. Well-spoken. He knew how to make everyone at the table feel like they were being listened to. But even early on, there was something in his eyes I didn't quite trust. A smile that never reached his cheeks. A handshake that felt performative. Still, I let it go. Claire said she was happy, and that was enough for me. And then came Ava, my granddaughter. She changed everything. The moment she was placed in my arms, I felt something inside me come back to life. The kind of love that didn't ask for anything. We bonded quickly. She would spend weekends with me, curled beside me on the couch with a blanket and a book, or in the kitchen helping me stir cookie dough with her tiny hands. Ava noticed things. Things no 6-year-old should be able to articulate. She'd stare at people like she was trying to solve a puzzle. And I'd catch her sometimes, watching her parents with this quiet, unreadable expression. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to push. But the cracks had started to show. Last Thanksgiving they didn't come. Claire said they had other plans, that travel was too complicated. Ava had a cold. David's schedule was tight. I told them I understood. I always said I understood. But I sat alone at that table, pie untouched, staring at 3 empty chairs. This year, Claire insisted they were coming. Said they were flying in 2 days early. "We'll make up for last time," she said. I smiled when she told me that, but my stomach turned in a way I couldn't explain. In the days leading up to Thanksgiving, we spoke more often than usual. Calls, texts. But something was off. Claire asked more questions than usual. Odd questions. Had I been to the doctor lately? Was I keeping up with my bills? Had I made any decisions about my will? I laughed them off. Told her I was just fine. But when I'd hang up the phone, the silence in the house suddenly felt heavier. She asked if I'd considered downsizing. "That house is too big for you, Mom," she said. "You should think about assisted living. Somewhere safer. Somewhere with support." I told her the truth. I liked my space. The same walls that held birthday banners, anniversary candles, my husband's laughter. I wasn't ready to let go. Claire didn't push, but I could hear the disapproval in her sighs. Then David started calling. Not often, but enough to make it odd. "Just checking in," he'd say. "Wanted to make sure everything's okay over there." I told myself they were just being thoughtful, but my gut whispered something else. I started noticing the way their tone shifted when I mentioned Ava. Like they didn't want me talking to her too much. Like they were guarding something. I brushed it off. I didn't want to see what might be there. I didn't want to believe that my own child could have anything less than love in her heart for me. But Ava, she always knew more than she said. That little girl would FaceTime me secretly from under her blankets. Tell me she missed me. That Mommy and Daddy were always working. That the house was tense. Her word. It broke my heart. But still, I told myself, Thanksgiving will be different. This time we'll laugh again. This time we'll find our way back. I spent the whole week baking, cleaning, organizing the bedrooms, laying out the same linen tablecloth my husband and I bought for our first Thanksgiving in the house. I pulled out the photo albums, set the table with care, lit the cinnamon candles Ava loved. I told myself this would be a healing weekend. I told myself it would be normal. But some part of me, some buried part one didn't want to admit existed, was bracing for something else. Something I couldn't name. And when they finally arrived, Claire smiling, David carrying the suitcase, Ava trailing behind them with that serious little face, I felt it in my chest. A warning. A shift. Something had changed. And I couldn't unfeel it. If you've ever felt a shift in your own family, the kind that creeps in slowly, hit the like button. And tell me where you're watching from. I want to hear your story too. Thanksgiving morning came early. I woke to the sound of wind brushing against the windows, leaves scraping softly along the porch, and the faint footsteps of Ava tiptoeing through the hallway. She always woke up before the rest of the house, just like I used to when I was her age, quiet, curious, and alone with her thoughts. The kitchen was already warm by 7 a.m. I had the turkey out, seasoned the way my husband liked it, garlic, thyme, lemon stuffed in the cavity, and butter under the skin. Sweet potatoes were already baking. The scent of cinnamon drifted up the stairs. I kept moving. Cooking always helped me think, helped me stay calm. I told myself it was going to be a good day. I repeated it like a prayer. Today will be good. We'll eat, laugh, remember who we are. But that hope started to fray by mid-morning. Claire barely made it downstairs before noon. When she did, she gave me that tight smile she always reserved for when she wanted to seem polite, but had no energy left to give. David was already on his phone, wandering through the house as if it belonged to him, checking the temperature, commenting on the fixtures, asking if I had ever thought about renovating. And Ava, she wasn't humming. She wasn't spinning or dancing or begging to help me decorate the table. Instead, she sat by the fireplace, knees pulled to her chest, clutching her little tablet like a security blanket. She kept glancing over at her mother, then back at the screen, then at me. I walked over to her once, offered her a cookie. She took it without a word. I knelt down beside her and brushed a hair from her face. Her eyes met mine, and in them I saw it again. That same expression I'd seen a few nights before. The one that didn't belong on a child's face. Worry. Too big for her little body. Around 2 p.m., the energy in the house shifted again. Claire wandered into the kitchen and started rearranging things I had already set. "You still use these old plates?" she asked, holding up the vintage floral china I'd used every Thanksgiving since she was born. I told her yes, that they were her grandmother's. She didn't respond. David came in soon after, sipping a glass of wine he'd poured without asking, and leaned against the counter like he had something to say. He asked how the neighborhood was lately. Was I finding it safe being here all alone? Did I still get around easily? Was the lawn guy showing up on time? I smiled and answered each question with the grace I'd spent a lifetime perfecting. But inside I was doing the math, tallying every odd comment, every strange question from the past 2 weeks. Claire's check-ins, her sudden concern about my health, David's constant questions about the house. The air felt thin. Then came the next one. David asked if I'd thought about setting up a trust. Said that at my age, it's wise to make decisions while you're still clear-headed. I looked at him for a long time. I didn't respond. Claire sipped her drink. Said nothing. Ava kept staring at her tablet. Later that afternoon, as the table was being set, Claire made a comment about my garden. You should let someone else take care of that, Mom. Or just sell the place and get somewhere manageable. I told her I liked the garden. I told her the house gave me comfort. She said, comfort can be dangerous when you get older. You can't always tell when you're not thinking straight anymore. That one stayed with me. I stepped outside for air. My hands were trembling. I remembered then all the little moments leading up to that day. The call 6 months ago when Claire asked to borrow money to cover a business opportunity. I gave it. The second time she asked for more. Told me she'd pay it back with interest. She never did. I never questioned her, because she was my daughter. But now, I wondered what else she'd ask for behind closed doors. That night, after dinner had been served and cleared, and the laughter had quieted into tired murmurs, I started putting away the dishes. Ava had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up under my old knitted throw. David went upstairs to take a business call. Claire followed. I was rinsing the last plate when I heard it. Their voices, muffled through the vent that connected the upstairs guest bedroom to the kitchen ceiling. I turned off the faucet. Claire's voice. Low. Fast. She's not going to last much longer in that house. We'll present the papers after Christmas. Say it's for her own good. Get a medical note. Easy. David responded. Just make sure Ava keeps her mouth shut. She's already asking too many questions. She's 6. She won't understand. Then silence. My knees buckled slightly. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. The room felt colder than it had all day. I stood there, still as stone, for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the soft tick of the clock on the wall. My daughter, my only child, plotting to take away my home, my independence, everything I had left. And worse than the betrayal was the fact that she sounded so calm about it. I thought back to the day I brought her home from the hospital, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, the way I used to rock her through storms, how I stayed up nights sewing her costumes, cheering at recitals, holding her after heartbreaks. I raised her to be strong, but not like this. Never like this. Dinner was quiet, almost too quiet. Ava had perked up just a bit, enough to nibble on her dinner roll, enough to watch her parents closely from across the table. She was no longer just a child enjoying a holiday. She was a child watching something fall apart. Claire was back to her rehearsed smiles, asking me how the cranberry sauce came out so smooth this year. David poured wine like he owned the bottle, and the table it sat on. They chatted about politics, made jokes about old recipes, and threw glances at each other, thinking I couldn't see the thread of secrecy stitching them together. I watched, and I smiled. But my body had never felt colder. After dessert, I told everyone I needed a moment to rest my feet, and left them with the dishes. Ava followed me quietly into the den. She didn't say a word. She just stood in the doorway, holding that little pink tablet. And for a second I thought she'd changed her mind. But then she walked over. She slid onto the couch beside me. And without looking at me, she whispered, "Grandma, I think you need to see this." She unlocked the screen and tapped open a folder. The video began with grainy footage, shaky, the angle low, as if the camera had been propped up behind a picture frame or maybe under the table. Claire's voice came first. She's slower than she used to be. And she repeats herself, "We'll use that." David laughed. "All we need is one assessment. Say she left the stove on, forgot where she parked. Boom, early onset signs. Judges eat that stuff up. Claire chimed in again. Once she's declared unfit, the house transfers. Her bank accounts go into trust. And she's out of the way. It's not cruel, it's practical. Another laugh. David. She won't even see it coming. Claire. She raised me to be smart. This is me being smart. The video ended. I didn't move. I couldn't. My throat tightened as though someone had tied an invisible rope around it. My heart, my poor old heart, felt like it had just burst and shattered at the same time. I had seen betrayal before. I had seen it in friends, in colleagues, but never in my own child. Ava leaned into me. Her little hand found mine and squeezed. I stared down at that screen, my face reflected in the glass, and I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. The walls didn't just crack, they collapsed. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't rush upstairs and demand an explanation. No. I sat up straighter. I took the tablet. I kissed Ava's forehead. And I told her everything was going to be all right. I stood and walked slowly back into the kitchen, where Claire was laughing at something David said, sipping her wine like she hadn't just signed my soul over for paperwork. I smiled. I asked who wanted to help pack leftovers. I complimented the pie David hadn't even touched. I laughed when Claire brought up her childhood nickname, pretending we were two women stitched by love, not lies. Because in that moment I realized I was no longer the same mother they thought they could outsmart. I had played the fool for too long, loved too hard, trusted too deeply. But now I was listening. Now I was watching. Now I had the truth. Before I tell you what I did next, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Because the kind of betrayal you're about to hear, most people wouldn't survive. And if you've ever had to stay quiet while your heart broke, share this video with someone who understands. So I played along. For the rest of the evening, I played my role so well, even Ava looked surprised. I praised the turkey. I offered second helpings. I brought out the family photo albums like I hadn't just watched my own daughter planning my demise on a hidden video. They laughed. They smiled. They relaxed. They thought I was still asleep in the illusion they built. But I was wide awake now. And behind my eyes I was planning. They wanted to institutionalize me. They wanted control. They thought I wouldn't fight. They had forgotten who raised them. Who taught them strength. Who taught them silence could be a weapon sharper than any scream. I had always fought for my family. But now I was fighting against them. And they had no idea what was coming next. After the guests left and the house quieted down, I sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by used napkins, cooling pies, and echoes of laughter that now felt foreign. I stirred my tea for 10 minutes without taking a sip. All I could see were the faces of the people I had raised, and the masks they wore. Years of giving. Years of pouring from an already cracked vessel, helping Claire through college when her loans ran dry, co-signing on their first mortgage when the bank needed more credit, babysitting Ava every weekend without question, even when my arthritis screamed louder than my voice. And not once did I ask for repayment. Because that's what mothers do, right? We give. We show up. We sacrifice. We stay silent. But in the silence, I had missed something. Or maybe I had chosen to ignore it. The slow turning of Claire's heart into something colder, harder, sharper. Had it started when her father died? He was the rock. The one who diffused her anger, softened her pride. Without him, Claire had become someone I didn't fully recognize. But I clung to her anyway. I kept hoping the warmth would return. That it was just grief, just stress, just life. It wasn't. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called Thomas, our old family attorney. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. His voice cracked when he heard mine. I need to update my estate plans, I said calmly. And I need everything discreet. He didn't ask questions. He just said, come in tomorrow. From that day forward I began living a double life. Outwardly, I was the same old woman who made too many casseroles and asked too many questions. But privately, I was documenting. I was protecting myself. I was unlearning decades of blind trust. I bought a small voice recorder from a pawn shop. Nothing fancy. Just enough to slip into my cardigan pocket during family visits. I started keeping a notebook beside my bed, writing down every strange comment, every veiled threat, every instance of pressure. And there were many. Claire began stopping by more often, not to visit, but to review documents. Always with that practiced smile and a folder in hand. "Mom, these are just basic authorizations. In case something happens. So we can help you with decisions." David was worse. He never spoke plainly, just endless questions disguised as concern. "How's your memory these days? Still remember the PIN to your bank account? No? You should write it down somewhere." I kept nodding, kept smiling, but I never signed a thing. Every time they visited, I recorded. Every time they called, I noted the time. And every time I doubted myself, I watched that video again. Just enough to remind myself, this isn't paranoia. This is survival. One afternoon, Claire brought Ava along and sent her to play in the backyard. Then she leaned in close over coffee. "Mom, this house is too much for you. It's falling apart. You shouldn't have to deal with upkeep. Why don't you come stay with us for a while? Just until we figure things out." That same daughter who once cried at age 9 because I didn't show up to her school recital. That same girl who used to leave notes on my pillow saying, "You're the best mommy in the world." Now speaking to me like a burden wrapped in paperwork. It was like grieving someone who was still alive. And yet I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I was preparing. Because I knew the day would come when they'd try to take everything. When they'd walk into a courtroom with fake concern and forged evidence. When they'd look a judge in the eye and say, "She's not well. We're just trying to help." But when that day came, I would be ready. I wasn't just fighting for my house or my dignity. I was fighting for every woman who had been cast aside by the people she once fed, clothed, and loved. I was fighting for the version of me that gave too much. And I wasn't going down quietly. If this part of the story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. These aren't just stories. They're echoes of real heartbreak and quiet strength. Subscribe and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? And which part of this story hit you the hardest? I used to think love was enough. Now I know better. Love without boundaries breeds betrayal. And I was finally setting mine. I sat at my kitchen table for what felt like hours, fingers resting on the pen, will spread out in front of me. The same table where I used to help Claire with her homework. The same table where David proposed to her, right in front of me, with a ring too big for his paycheck and a speech rehearsed in the bathroom mirror. Now it was the table where I planned my revenge. Not out of bitterness, not out of rage, but out of something colder, calmer, rational, justice. I rewrote my will that night. Quietly. Precisely. And this time I didn't leave a cent to Claire or David. Everything, the house, my savings, the little pension I'd tucked away, would go to Ava. Because if anyone had earned my love without manipulation, it was her. She was the only one who had looked me in the eye that day at the dinner table. The only one who had seen what I wasn't ready to say. The only one who, with trembling hands, had whispered, "Grandma, you need to see this." She may have only been 7, but children like her, children who notice, who care, who carry truths heavier than their age, deserve more than this world often gives. So I left it all to her. With one condition. That it would remain in trust until she turned 21. Managed by my lawyer and a secondary guardian I'd chosen carefully, my late husband's sister, Miriam. The only other person I trusted without flinching. But that wasn't enough. Because I knew Claire and David. They'd challenge it. Claim I wasn't in my right mind. Drag Ava into the mess. Twist the story until even I wouldn't recognize it. So I went further. I made an appointment with Dr. Salter, our longtime family doctor. I scheduled a full cognitive evaluation. Memory tests. Neurological screenings. Psychiatric evaluations. The works. He looked surprised when I asked, but he didn't question me. "Any reason, Martha?" he asked gently. I smiled. "Let's just call it preventive maintenance." When the results came in, I requested everything in writing. Stamped. Signed. Certified. A full medical report declaring me mentally sound and fully capable of making legal decisions. Then I took it to Thomas, my lawyer. Together, we updated the will and filed it with multiple redundancies. One copy in his office, one in the bank, and one in a safe at home only I could open. And finally, I sat down in front of my phone camera, stared into the lens and pressed record. I didn't dress up. I didn't fix my hair. I didn't prepare a script. I just spoke. To Ava. To the courts. To whoever would one day try to question my voice. I explained everything. What Claire and David had planned. What I had discovered. What they didn't know I knew. And why I had made the decision to protect my legacy from them. I cried only once when I said her name. Ava, sweetheart. I hope you never watch this. I hope by the time you're old enough none of this matters anymore. But just in case it does, I need you to know that I believed in you. I saw you. I loved you without question. And I left you everything not just because I had to, but because I wanted to. That recording was stored on 3 separate flash drives and sealed with the will. And still I wasn't finished. Because even the best laid legal plans could be challenged. But character is harder to fake. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I invited Ava over alone. No mother. No father. Just the 2 of us like it used to be. I baked her favorite cookies. Let her pour extra sprinkles. We built puzzles and sat on the porch watching the wind stir the trees. And then I started talking. Not about the betrayal. Not yet. I told her stories. About her mother as a child. About her grandfather's bad jokes. About how scared I was the day I dropped her off at kindergarten for the first time. And slowly I began teaching her things no one else would. How to trust her instincts. How to speak up, even when her voice trembles. How to ask questions, especially when grown-ups try to make her feel small. I didn't make it scary. I made it gentle. Like laying breadcrumbs. I asked her, "Do you remember what you showed me that day?" She nodded slowly. "Why did you?" Her answer broke me. "Because you looked happy, but your eyes weren't." Out of the mouths of children. From then on, I wrote her letters. Dozens of them. Each one tucked into a box she'd get when she turned 18. Not just filled with advice, but with truth. Because Ava deserved a story different from the one Claire was writing for her. And as for Claire and David, they had no idea the stage was set. No idea the woman they believed to be gullible had outmaneuvered them. And when the final curtain would fall, they would realize. They didn't lose because I fought dirty. They lost because I fought smart. And because they underestimated the one thing they never truly understood. A woman who loves can also learn when to stop. Let them come. Let them challenge. Let them spin their stories. I had mine written in law, blood, and steel. And I wasn't done yet. It was Thanksgiving again. 1 year had passed since that unforgettable dinner. 1 year since Ava pressed that phone into my palm. 1 year since I looked at my daughter and saw a stranger staring back at me. But this time the table was quieter. Smaller. Simpler. No loud performances of love. Just a roast chicken, a few side dishes, and the only 2 people I wanted in my home, Miriam and Ava. I could feel it before it even happened, the shift in the air. Peace had finally settled in my bones. That morning as we sipped tea in the sunroom, Ava playing at our feet, I heard the sound of tires on gravel. A sleek black car pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out in a neat gray suit holding a folder. Thomas. He didn't stay long, just handed me a single cream envelope, nodded respectfully, and left. I knew what it was. Inside, a letter addressed to Claire. Ava watched me seal it with a wax stamp and tuck it into another envelope marked, Private and Legal Correspondence. She didn't ask questions. I handed it to the courier. And just like that, the wheel began to turn. Claire would receive it by evening. And when she did, she'd open the neat pages expecting control. Perhaps a note about assets or a revised deed. Instead, she'd find a cold and comprehensive summary of my will. My medical evaluations. My official statement filed and witnessed. She'd read that every cent had been left to Ava. That Miriam had been appointed executor. That any attempt to contest the will would trigger the release of video evidence proving intent to manipulate and commit coercion. She'd also find one final sentence handwritten by me. You didn't lose because I was weak. You lost because I stopped pretending to be. No calls came that evening. No texts. No threats. Just silence. A silence I had once feared, but now cherished. As we cleared the table, Ava stood on tiptoe to help me dry the dishes. She looked up at me and whispered, "Grandma, thank you for listening to me." I turned to her, brushing a damp curl from her forehead, and said, "Thank you, sweetheart, for being the only one who still saw me." Later that night, Miriam and I sat on the porch wrapped in wool blankets. The stars were soft and blinking above, and for the first time in a long time, I felt unafraid. There was no longer a war to fight, just the quiet aftermath. A garden finally safe from the weeds. But fate, it seemed, had one more twist for us. The following week, Thomas called with news. Claire was under investigation. One of the institutions David had contacted to inquire about having me declared mentally unfit had flagged the request, especially after discovering the couple had attempted to open a joint account using forged power of attorney documents. They had crossed lines too early, too arrogantly, and now they'd have to answer for it. I said nothing when I heard. No joy. No satisfaction. Just finality. That kind of betrayal doesn't end with fireworks. It ends in the quiet shutting of doors you'll never reopen. I packed a small suitcase the next day and left the house. Not because I was forced to, but because I chose to. I moved to a smaller home, closer to Miriam, where Ava could visit after school. The house I'd once filled with memories of Claire, I left behind like an old coat. Worn. Used. No longer mine. And as I stepped out the front door for the last time, I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I carried everything that mattered with me. My name. My story. My voice. People think age weakens you, that it makes you forgetful, or docile, or afraid to act. But here's the truth. I may be old, but I am not blind. And silence was never my weakness. It was my greatest weapon. A blade I kept sheathed, until the moment I needed it most. Now I rest easy, not because I won, but because I reclaimed what was always mine: dignity, truth, and peace.